right, everyone. Welcome back to Success on the Rocks, episode number 2. Today we have a very interesting guest with us, Ron Evans. He's what I consider a serial entrepreneur, owns 5 companies here in Austin, Texas, and the guy's doing amazing things. So, Ron, thanks for taking the time today. Thanks. I know you have a busy schedule, so I really appreciate it. We're gonna get started on everything here and really do a deep dive. I think you have a lot of valuable insights and knowledge that you can offer to everyone. So I'm excited to do it, man.
I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, appreciate it. Cheers.
It's happy hour somewhere, right?
That's right. So, Ron, I'd like to start off. I know I didn't list your companies, but I know we'll get into that here shortly. But tell me a little bit about your upbringing, where you from, and how you kind of came to be who you are today.
Well, I was born here, Austin, native. Really, most of my time was kind of bouncing back and forth between Austin and Dallas, and kind of Dallas is where I started my career. I've really spent a lot of my life in the real estate business. My dad has a probably more interesting story than I do. You know, I was raised around a real estate development family, and so I learned it from the bottom up. I worked on his developments, and you know, it was picking up cigarette butts when the tenants would be out taking a smoke break. Or unstopping toilets, so it certainly wasn't glamorous. I learned it from a young age. I was always around it and always heard my dad talk about it. I really admired him. He's passed away, lived to be about 80 years old. I really admired him and what he did. I considered very few else in my life, just having been around it so much. He started with absolutely nothing. He told me stories of his dad was a pastor. If you know this term, Pentecostal pastor. So kind of what that term holy roller. That's kind of where that term came from. And my dad was a pastor at a very, very young age. He considered his calling, after I think about 5 years of doing that, he really considered his calling in business. He thought he was being led to do something other than what his dad had done. And I think he told me a story one time where he and my mom combined the one thing that they got from their parents after they got married was a refrigerator. I think it was used. So they had nothing. They really had nothing. He started in the insurance business, and he got recruited by some guys he met in that business. He was an incredibly hard worker, very dedicated, great salesman, great personality, just loved people. And he turned that into a real estate career. He did everything from property management to brokerage, development. He was always in that commercial real estate world, and so spending a lot of time around it. I've dabbled in a lot of other things, but that was kind of what I always just knew that'd be the primary force in my career.
Okay, so you think you always kind of had this entrepreneurial business owner mindset? Was it something that you picked up from your father? Or do you think it was something that was kind of just naturally came to you?
I always I've thought about that a lot. There's so many components to what drives us and motivates us. You can't really oversimplify it, but you can kind of pick those key factors. And I know I was always outgoing and talkative. I was always the one getting in trouble in school for talking. And if it was 10 of us talking, I got in trouble because my voice was the loudest. So I'd always be the one getting busted, no matter what. It was always me in trouble. And my parents would always get, a report card, and everything was great except self-control or talking in class or something like that. So I kind of had that desire to talk and be friends with people and be social. And I think that leads to a career in sales. I always kind of knew that I wasn't afraid of that. So, but you can also train yourself in sales. We all do. We learn. And yeah, I thought that real estate and some type of sales job was always in my future. For many, many years, even though I didn't start my own company, my first company, I had a small mortgage company at a point in time, but I didn't really, and that was kind of a side gig. I didn't really start my own first company until I was 42 years old in 2008. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. That was interesting timing. But it was brokerage. I was doing real estate brokerage with, no salary. And so in a way, you're self-employed. It takes a lot and there's a lot of people in this commercial real estate business that go out there and just pound the streets every day, and they don't always know where their next paycheck's coming from or how they're paying their mortgage. And I've always admired that. I love that in a person, especially people who aren't naturally sales disposed to sales. I really admire that. I've known some people who are fantastic salesmen in the real estate industry who it just wasn't natural to them, but they were very successful because they had a system and they just followed it. I love that. I just think that people who go out there, I used to sit next to a guy at CBRE who you could just tell by listening to him was very average on the phone, but he never stopped dialing. Mm-hmm. And he made great money. It was just a numbers game to him. So that's always been appealing to me. I always thought that I wanted to be in some type of sales and ultimately some type of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, for myself, I don't think that this is something that naturally comes to me, for my financing business, and
Right.
definitely very relationship oriented. And, it's something that I've just had to get better at. And I do think it's a skill you can learn. But ultimately, it's a lot of just tenacity and putting in the hours and the work that you have to do to get ahead.
Then don't you think that's like, I'm starting to see less of that. I think there's a lot of kind of the attitude maybe in our culture currently. It's a little bit more punch the clock. And look, I'm not faulting that because there's a lot more to life than work, right?
Yeah.
We need time with our families and with our hobbies and with our pets. And I think maybe as a culture we do overwork. I think there's sometimes too much emphasis put on that. But I think that I'm seeing less and less of people who really just kind of want to go through that entrepreneurial grind. And so when I see it and I learn stories about people who've done it, I really admire those stories. And I think I heard on your last podcast, you were talking about, it's ironic that you and maybe the guy you interviewed both agreed that maybe y'all weren't the most, salespeople, but you're numbers guys, and yet you're doing a podcast and a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So that's great. Step out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah, man. And to go back on what you just said, I think, when it comes to the work-life balance stuff, I think for me, it's kind of blended. It's hard to separate the two, but work kind of is my life. It's what I enjoy to do, and I'm perfectly okay with that. It is life, and I don't think, not for everyone, some people definitely, I think, have to separate the two. But for myself, I think there's a perfect blend in it. And, sometimes, I'll kind of unplug and do a hobby or do something I enjoy, on top of work. But also a lot of the times I just feel like working, and I'm going to go in and just knock something out.
Was that modeled for you growing up? Or did you discover that on your own?
Not what I'm doing exactly. So my father is a business owner. He's a small-time business owner. He owns a construction company. He does tile, he does flooring. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot of important lessons from my father when it comes to work ethic and, just putting your face down and doing the work.
Right.
But I am in a completely different industry, and he's all about work, and I truly think he enjoys it as well. So I guess some of it was modeled, some of it I think was just always growing up, idolizing entrepreneurs was kind of just something that I was interested in and something I strive to be like. So it naturally, since I've been 18 years old, I've been doing that, and it's been something that I've been pursuing. So I'd say a mix of both.
Okay.
But going back to you, I want to talk a little bit more about, before we dive into everything, what kind of person were you in high school? Were you an athlete? Were you a scholar? What was life like back then?
Well, I haven't been asked that question in a long time, if ever. You called me a serial entrepreneur, and I think that's part of my nature. I was always into everything. I was friends with every group. I always hated a group that was supposedly an outcast. That just never sat right with me. So I liked everybody. I really wanted to be friends with everybody. I was an athlete. I grew up, playing lots of sports and then kind of focused on football during the fall and tennis the rest of the year, and always loved anything athletic. But I also love art. I played the piano and guitar in bands growing up, and really just have this passion for music and art. Really admire anybody who can make their living that way, especially today.
Yeah.
It's just harder and harder, and so it's just a love. Like you said, you loved business and entrepreneurship. Anyone who's into art, they just have to love it. They do it because it's their life. That's what they know they were meant to be, right? So I've dabbled in that. In high school, I was into kind of business clubs and anything that involved being around people. But I think that's good and bad. So you spread yourself too thin, I would tend to do that. Some people would stay like piano, right? I can sit down and kind of like a piano bar, fake a song and play that. But I never studied it enough to be great. And the person who studies enough to be great, they just sit down and play, and, I'm in tears. It's like, wow, I wish I had stuck with it.
Yeah.
So I kind of spread myself thin, and now I'm still that way a little bit. I have to really work to stay focused on a thing or two things because I'm a little ADD. I'm going to bounce around. I think growing up, I identified that pretty early. I don't necessarily know that I figured out what to do with it until I got to be a lot more mature. But yeah, it was kind of anything and everything. If I discovered a hobby that I really liked, it's all my poor parents or my girlfriend at the time or my friends or whatever heard about for a while until I discovered the next one, and then I'd go all in on that. I got my pilot's license at a very young age and started flying a lot. Had intentions of going in the Air Force actually, and if anybody remembers back to the late '80s, early '90s. There were a lot of budget cuts in the military, and my hopes and dreams of being the next Maverick went away. But I kept flying and did a lot. Got a lot of ratings, and I still love to scuba dive. In fact, my family, all of them scuba dive, and so that's kind of a hobby of ours. So I think that translates into my business life. I'm just interested in a lot of things, and it's good and bad. I've got to bridle myself and stay focused.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how you set up your life today. With the multiple companies, it's for me in the past, I have tried to run multiple companies, and a lot of the times it'll actually pull your focus from one and cause one to suffer, if not both or all of them to suffer. So being able to balance that all at the same time is definitely a skill, I would say, and probably something that, like you said, it does come to you naturally, something that you're interested in, and something that you probably just can't live without. I mean, I'm sure at one point you only had the one company, and you started thinking about what other avenues to take it, what kind of cross-selling you can incorporate into it. So talk to me about your college education. Where did you go after high school? What college did you decide on? What did you major in? And ultimately, what led you into real estate?
Yeah, so University of Texas, Austin, got a BBA. We're not really all that focused, other than finance classes, not really any particular focus on real estate. I still was toying with a few other ideas at the time, but I kept coming back to the real estate, the commercial real estate concept. This is just, it's what I knew and what I loved, and I kept my options open. I entertained other ideas, but it wasn't. I felt like it was something that I had known long enough and felt comfortable enough with at a young age. We think we know so much when we're 18 or even mid-20s or even 30, and yet I knew how much I didn't know, but I also knew I'd been around it long enough that it was probably something I would always be involved in some way. And so started the real estate career with just straight up brokerage. In fact, I started the real estate career with something I'm glad I learned, but I didn't like: property management. That's that's a more of a process oriented job. I'm not great at process oriented jobs. I've got to really push myself to follow daily routines and processes. I'd rather go out and sell something, put deals together. But I'm glad I learned it because learning the property management aspect of commercial real estate is just one of the fundamentals. You know, it's core to everything every building we drive by, somebody's managing the budget. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody's hired the landscaper. There's a trash, company doing the dumpster. And so I learned that for several years in my early career and then moved pretty quickly onto property leasing and did many years in commercial, mostly office building and industrial projects, leasing. Moved from that pretty quickly into tenant representation. So represented a lot of tenants and office leasing. Did corporate services work, and so really learned what it was like to run large accounts, nationwide accounts. Again, not something I'd want to do long term. It's very, very repetitive, and you've got to be great at just processes and bureaucracy and filling out forms. I did a lot of work for Federal Express for about 5 years, and it's a huge company with a lot of processes in place. So you got to stay on top of the paperwork and if you remember the movie Office Space. And there's a joke about the cover sheet that they've changed the cover sheet, and it's a big oh my gosh, did you not get the memo about the new cover sheet? And you kind of feel that way when you're working on a large corporate services account. It's like, oh, we're on version 5 of the cover sheet instead of version 4. Sorry, I missed it. It's not my nature.
Right.
But it was great experience, really great experience. Again, all of those things are building blocks to creating who you become someday. And I don't think we ever stop building. You never arrive, right? There's so many get-rich schemes, and oh my God, make it overnight. And I guess a few people win the lottery. A few people, got in on Tesla when it was pennies and held it long enough. But that's not most of us.
Right.
Most of us have to work at it, and you have to work at it for a very long time and just stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What was the first job you had right out of college?
Property management and real estate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that with a bigger firm or?
Medium-sized firm. Yeah.
Okay.
Dallas area. At the time they were called so there was a Swearingen management company I think they were sold to another company. They were pretty big in the Southwest and all over Texas, especially in the Dallas area. And then transitioned for a short time into tenant rep with a company called the Foltz Companies.
Okay.
And from there, I spent most of my brokerage time at CBRE and Cushman & Wakefield. And I think that's where I learned the most about what I wanted to do. I started building the concepts of my future, kind of like those years were my training years. I really enjoyed doing tenant rep, but there's very few markets in the city where I think there's as much competition as Dallas. Obviously, the big cities like New York, it's brutal. And I've done some deals up in New York City. It's a whole nother world.
Right.
But, I'd go out cold calling. And I still do some of this today, and I don't know anybody who does it. I'll walk into offices, for example, I do a lot of medical deals. I'll walk into doctors' offices kind of like the drug reps do. And take a flyer for some of my developments. I still cold call in person. I learned that years and years ago. You'd do that in Dallas, and you'd get out of an elevator, and one of your buddies, who's your competitor with another company, would be coming out of their office making a cold call. You're like, oh man. So it was highly competitive, and I knew I wanted something that was a little more. I wanted a model that I had created that wasn't. So many other people doing the same thing. You just feel, you feel better when you're selling something that truly is a little unique. The model or the what you're presenting to the marketplace is unique, that it catches their attention. Maybe they've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And so I started, the seeds of that really were kind of, underground, but getting root early in my career, and I just knew it was going to take time. It took a lot longer than I thought it would before I jumped out and did that. But there were some interesting. I didn't see that coming days in my life, in my career. That really, a couple of them I can think that were very pivotal, that opened doors that I never saw coming, and it led me to where I am today. If you're just out there swinging the bat enough, you're eventually you're gonna hit something.
Yeah.
And you don't always know exactly what's coming.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of our, it's funny that you mentioned property management. A lot of our successful clients actually, they come from a property management foundation, first job out of college. And I think it's crucial to success because a lot of the deals we see, a lot of the deals we help with financing on, are value add in terms of management. They might not be a physical value add where you're going in and renovating the whole building or property, whatever the case may be. But it's really just poorly managing the business.
Sure.
And when you've been in that business, you can see a little bit where you can identify opportunities that others can't because you've done it firsthand. And I remember last time we met, you had worked with your father for a brief period, introduction into in development, right? So how crucial was that in terms of getting your foot into development, and what kind of lessons did he teach you that still help you today?
So foundationally, it was everything. My first job, it was my dad who gave it to me, right? And I'll tell you that story. It's kind of funny. It's brief, but it's got a twist. As far as my way into development, I didn't find my way back to development until I was in my 40s. So, it was a very long process, and I had long since left the nest. So my dad gave me my first job, and he was the president and general manager of this swearingen management company at the time in Dallas. And he told me, this is kind of a nepotism thing here. The partners in the firm are not going to be too happy about this unless this is almost like an entrepreneurship. I mean,
Internship.
Thank you. Great word. Yeah, internship. He said on one day, he told me, you're hired. I'm going to hire you. I'm going to let you learn property management. And 2 years to the day from now, you're fired. That was it. And he said, it's an internship, right? You can't stay long term. You've got to go do your own thing, but I can help you get your start. And so that was a huge blessing for me. While I was at that company, I learned property management, but I also started doing property leasing. That's a lot more of a sales job.
Yeah.
And so I really started learning that there. Foundationally, just like I said, hearing my dad, osmosis, you just hear it talked about all the time. And he was always very willing to coach me and teach me at a very young age. I tried to do the same thing with I've got 3 sons, and none of them went into the business, which is interesting. They all wanted to kind of go their own direction. And my dad was always very willing to sit with me and talk with me and teach me and coach me. And of course, all of his examples, everything he taught me was what he knew. So it was the real estate business. And so I think having that kind of a coach in your life, I know a lot of people don't have that. You don't necessarily have that in your family, but we can find mentors. We can find those people. And if it's not informally, it can be formally. Colleges have programs, communities have programs, Chamber of Commerces have programs where you can find mentorships.
Absolutely.
And I think people need to take more advantage of that because, again, when you hear a person tell you about their path, they teach you about patience, you learn about what it's like, what their path was, and not what you see on social media. A guy sitting inside of the cabin of a fake jet acting like he's living the life and it's not real anyway.
Yeah.
That's not where you want to learn. And so, my first mentor was my dad. Yeah.
Awesome. What kind of, you mentioned leasing, what kind of assets were you leasing right after working for your father?
So primarily multi-tenant office buildings. That's where I cut my teeth, learning to lease multi-tenant office buildings. That led pretty quickly into tenant representation. And so I started, instead of representing the landlords or the property owners, I started representing the tenants. And I began specializing in a few things, which is kind of, one of the things I've learned to do. I'm a generalist, but I've learned to create verticals or niches, and I've learned to create vertical integration. And again, that's kind of our differentiator in our businesses now. But I developed a few niches in tenant rep. So, before the dot bomb in the early 2000s, a couple of brokers and I partnered up at some of the bigger firms, CBRE, and went after tech deals. and we did a lot of tech business. We represented a lot of tech firms. Once you can speak their language and they know that you've done work for, Hitachi led into a deal with Sony, and Sony led into a deal with a local tech firm. And that happens. That's just kind of a natural progression. I did the same thing with law firms. There was a law firm advisory group nationwide at CBRE. And so we just got to work a lot of law firm deals. And once you've done one and then the next, and you begin to know all the partners in all the other firms. And so I was always willing, if somebody called me and said, hey, I want you to help me lease a space for a bowling alley, I'd go do it. Right? But you develop these niches and these things that you specialize in, and it gets you credibility pretty fast. You do your research, you do your homework, you figure out what it is that motivates them, in their real estate needs. And then you get people to introduce you, and you meet one or two, and you do one. The first or the second's always the hardest,
Yeah.
And once you get a couple under your belt, you blink, and all of a sudden you've done 10. And so that was kind of that progression through project leasing, tenant representation, and then I can give you the next step if you want it. I can tell you where I went from there.
Yeah.
So it was one of those I didn't see that coming moments where I'd always wanted to get into construction and development. And I started to feel like at the age I was, approaching 40, that it was about time. And I got a call from an owner, a partner in a commercial construction company in Dallas. And he asked me if I wanted to come on board and do business development from them. And they were a very successful company, very, very well known, particularly in office build out. And it was that you talk about jumping out without a parachute. It was kind of like everything I had built up to that point to be a broker. I left, and very suddenly left, and made that decision very quickly. I was with them for about 3 years. Really liked it. They treated me very well. They were great. They're still a very, very good company in the Dallas area. I have nothing to say, but it's called Scott and Reed. Nothing but the highest things to say about those guys. And they have, I think last year I saw maybe in the Dallas Business Journal, they were voted the best medium-sized company, voted by employees to work for.
Right.
Great company, great guys, great people, and they've really done well. I learned a lot in those 3 years, but I also learned how much I didn't know. And from there, I made the decision to come to Austin. Another kind of didn't see that moment coming. I was introduced to somebody who really understood the medical office park model, and it was not being done in Austin. And so about 3 years later, I cannonballed out again, moved to Austin, and started a medical office park development model. And I signed the agreements. Really, we kind of had a license agreement with this brand called Huffman Builders, and they were very good at doing that. I signed the agreement on April Fool's Day in 2008, and then I moved my family in July, and then the financial markets melted down in September, October, and I thought, what have I done? I'll never survive this. And I almost didn't. About 3 or 4 years, the 3 or 4 years were really, really tough. I think in 3 years we built one 7,000-foot building and one medical interiors. That was it. It was a slog.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Tough times to start a business for sure. But I'm sure that was instrumental and taught you a lot of lessons. How did you navigate that market? You probably didn't know it was coming, right? What you said, you started 2007.
2008, but
2008. Okay.
6 months before Lehman Brothers crashed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we didn't know it was coming.
So, right out the gates, getting hit with that. How did you navigate were spirits high? What was going on in your mind at the time?
I think I've been very blessed. I think I've had a lot of good luck. The harder you work, though, the luckier you get. I kept mostly a very positive attitude, and I kept trying. There were days when our fate I had a business partner at the time. It was just 2 of us, and he's moved on to other things, and he does developments. And I did some development down in Houston, and now I think he's permanently moved maybe to Laredo and is doing some industrial developments down there, and I think he's doing well. So we kind of went our separate ways, but I think the 2 of us tried to stay lighthearted and laugh as much as we could, And we kept hammering away. We kept thinking we were going to make it. We kept, one of the things that I tell anybody, in no matter what kind of business you're in, is learn to raise money. And I talked to 19 banks. My 19th bank gave me a yes after 18 banks had said no on my very first deal ever. And it was a small deal, 7,000 square foot building that we were building for. We took a little suite in it for our own offices, and then we built for a dermatologist and a dentist in Pflugerville, Texas.
Wow.
And it's that, getting told no that many times and continuing to ask. And it's interesting how you kind of hone your craft, and then you just happen to have your pitch down well enough at the right moment. You find somebody who's, I'm going to say a bank who is also entrepreneurial. That sounds like a paradox, right? Mm-hmm. But we found one,
right?
And they said, we get it. We had a model, right? We had pre-sold to these doctors. So it certainly reduced the risk. It wasn't like we were building spec real estate. Mm-hmm. We had pre-sold to them. And we just talked to enough banks till we got a yes. And then the second deal was almost that hard. But we've learned to raise money. We've learned to bring in partners. We've learned to joint venture. We've learned, to tackle much, much bigger loans and much, much bigger projects, from, a 3/4 of an acre development to 25 acre development. We've got 2 of those going right now that are mixed use developments. And we've learned to craft our model so that we can borrow money and reduce risk. We're really not a spec builder, spec developer, but we've learned how to go out and find deals in advance. I always call it selling air. It's easy to have an existing piece of real estate and tour somebody through it, and they decide if they like it or not, and then they buy it or lease it. It's a lot different when you point to a raw piece of land, mm-hmm. and you tell them what's going to be there, and you show them a rendering created by an architect, and try to convince them that, yes, it's going to look like this, and yes, we're going to pull this off, and it, even though it's 18 months from now, you should sign up right here, sign on the dotted line. And that took some learning. Again, a lot of no's, a lot of, you got to create faith and trust. But the more of those you do, now I can drive around the city, and just in the northern suburbs, I can go point to 5-6 developments that we've done, and they're beautiful, yeah. and they're our billboard, they're our marketing piece, because now we've done it. But we still keep trying to, find our way into some new deals that are maybe a little new for us as well.
Right. Now, on that first deal, did you guys have investors on board? Was it your own capital? Because I know, when it comes to development, a lot of the thought process, so to speak, is it's very hard to get into development if you don't have capital already.
Right.
So on that first deal, did you guys have outside investors and some added pressure on there, especially in a challenging environment? Or was it all of your own capital? How did you launch that very first one?
Oddly enough, we have done a lot of deals where we have had limited partners and JV partners. That one we didn't. And we didn't have a lot of our own money either, because we'd spent most of it, right? We had been living on what we had saved and borrowed money, and we'd borrowed from friends and family, and we were upside down. When you realize that broke doesn't mean zero, it means a big negative number. You've got that. You wake up every morning really motivated to fix that. We didn't have a lot of money, but we put some of our own money into it. And I consider the years that we had been building to that point, supporting ourselves, but marketing materials and all the literally the gas money in our cars to go make cold calls on doctors. That was all equity.
Right.
And there was a lot of sweat equity in it as well. On that first deal, though, we just happened to have, we were in a different lending environment, though, as well. If I could get a project, so we would condo these buildings and these developments, and we would pre-sell them mostly to doctors. That began to change and morph a little over the years. We'd find other professions who wanted to own their own real estate. And so I'd go from 100% medical in my developments to 60 medical, 40 professional. But if you could go out in those days and get it 50% pre-sold, you could, with some experience and good credit, you could go borrow what you needed to close on the land, build the infrastructure. So, the utilities, the site work, the parking lots, et cetera, build the buildings, and even turnkey the medical interiors. And you could do that with 50% pre-sales and a pretty significant non-refundable deposit from those doctors. So that was our model. That's literally how we started. We started by going out. That was our first deal. Our first deal, we had 2 buyers on the hook, and they'd said, we like this location, we like the building you've designed, we want to be there, and we want to own. So we'll give you a deposit. I then had to go out and find that loan. I had to put a little bit of money in it, as did my partner, and we built it. And I don't think we made any money the first time because we probably made enough mistakes, and it turned out to take longer than we thought. And we had interest on our loan, but we got our first deal.
Wow.
Yeah. And we probably paid ourselves some small salaries along the way just to keep it going. And that's how we broke into it.
So since the start, because I know now a lot of your stuff is still build to sell, correct? As opposed to build to lease. How was that, in that first deal, that sounds like that's what you guys did. Where did that come from? Is it just that the numbers look better on selling the properties rather than leasing it? Why didn't you guys look at it from more of a long-term hold as opposed to turning around and selling these properties?
So you're not really, we didn't do that because of it was the more profitable way to go. We did it because it was the path of least resistance for that model. And I'll explain that. It's certainly more valuable to lease space because you lease the space. Hopefully you got a good credit tenant in there. They sign a 5-10 year lease. Doctors usually sign 10 or longer. I've done some 15 years with some like CVS, dialysis, and some of the larger medical groups in the Austin area now. We've built for so many of them. I'd much rather have a lease because now that real estate is a lot more valuable. It's got a long-term lease in it. We can keep it or we can sell it to an investor. But that's not what doctors wanted. Most doctors sought my projects because they wanted to own. They want to own their own real estate. They want their practice to move into that real estate, and they want to sign a lease with themselves personally as the landlord. And so instead of paying a stranger rent, they want to pay themselves rent.
Right.
And so that was the model. I mentioned that group Huffman that we kind of teamed up with originally. We've kind of, amicably gone our own way, but they're still very active in several markets. And they taught us this model. It happened to be a neighbor of mine in Plano, Texas. And great guy, Jerry Huffman, and he was very, very good to us. He did a lot to help support us in those early years. I thought I knew a lot about real estate, but when it came to development financing, I didn't, and especially building for medical. So we did what the market, we answered what the market wanted. And we still do that today. You'll see signs on our developments, that'll say, medical, professional, retail, space, for sale, or lease, or land for sale. And so it's like, rowing your boat out and putting about 6 hooks in the water with 6 different kinds of bait and being perfectly satisfied with what you catch. Our model doesn't so dictate what we do that we'll say no to any of those deals. If we buy, 20 acres and somebody wants to do a build-to-suit and they want us to build it and lease it to them for 15 years, I've got a couple of those going right now. I love that. But if they say, no, do a build-to-suit and we want to own it, we'll sell it to them. If they just want to buy a 5,000 square foot condominium for their optometry office, we'll sell it to them. And so it's just taking what the market will give you. And you kind of have to do that when you're out there pre-selling and pre-leasing these things, because we need those deals to kick these projects off. Right. You just can't be that picky. But it's led to so much. That attitude is really kind of how these multiple companies started. I'm sure we're going to get into that as well, what the companies are and what they do. But that really, I think that mentality led to a lot of the opportunities in our business models, as well as the companies that we started.
Great.
That's correct.
So we've been speaking about the development company. When did you realize that, there was a different arm of the business that you wanted to implement?
Well, we started there. There wasn't a second arm of the company when we started. It just was folded into our development company. So the model I kind of explained to you, where we built these medical office condo parks, right? We were our own general contractor. So one of the ways that we controlled the project, controlled the quality, or so we thought, and brought additional cash into the model was to build it ourselves, to act as our own GC. That was easier said than done for a couple of guys who were really real estate guys. My business partner and I, when we started this thing, we didn't have any. I mean, I understood construction a little bit. I'd been raised around it, and but I didn't know it. I didn't have a working knowledge of it in actually day to day in the business, and we made a lot of mistakes. The buildings are still standing and they're still beautiful, but I can't say it wasn't costly, and it didn't cause some delays. And there weren't complicated projects, except that the medical interiors, which is another part of our model, is that we turnkey these projects. So we don't just typically sell the shell to a doctor, but we'll turnkey the interior. So it could be an optometry office that may not be that complicated, but then it was a dental office or an oral surgeon or a dialysis center, a surgery center, ambulatory surgery center. That morphed into some micro hospitals, some ERs, and that got complicated. And so we were always our own builder, but we knew we needed a professional that was a construction professional, not a real estate professional. And we went out and found it. And it's my current business partner, Charbel Dada, who I happened to find at another construction company here in Austin. Took me about 6 months to convince him that to cast off of where he was as an employee in a construction company and join me. And he brought that expertise that we didn't have. And he really compelled us over the next several years, or the several years after he came on, to start looking outside of just being our own builder. And that made perfect sense. And it was, we're good at medical. So let's go do some medical design builds for some doctors. And we did. Like I said, some urgent care, some dialysis, freestanding dialysis centers, some ERs, micro hospitals. So instead of that being in our development, it'd be on their land that we'd help, because we have a brokerage company, we'd help them broker the purchase of the site. And we'd build for them and they would own it. Well, then Charbel encouraged us to start looking at for bid work. We really only kind of did design build or design assist at the time. And then he said, look, if the market gets tough, which it has several times since then, we've got to be able to go out and compete against other GCs and bid and win work. So we started doing that and started winning those deals. And then we started doing non-medical deals. So churches, schools, entertainment venues. We just built a coffee roasting facility for Dutch Brothers, about an 80,000 square foot coffee roasting facility up in the Dallas area. We do industrial now. So it was under that encouragement from him. I use that term maybe as a euphemism because he's very ambitious, and he pushed and pushed and pushed, and thankfully so. We realized then that construction company needed its own brand. And it was the thing all unto itself. So we started Cadre Construction. We formalized that and broke it out away from the development company. And now he's the CEO of that company and runs that company day to day, and has done a great job of growing that business. We've got an office in Dallas now, and we build all over Texas. So I kind of still spearhead most of the development side of our business, but we cross paths on a lot of it, and we both spend a lot of time in each other's sandbox. So that kind of grew out of just necessity. Again, just being ambitious, wanting to grow the business. You start to see those things more clearly when you grow and face new opportunities. Well, we didn't really want to always be at the mercy of an architecture firm that was outside of our company. And we still use other architects. Depends on what we're building. So we've got an architecture firm that's run by our chief architect and partner named Warren Ince. He's great. We did plans with him on a big medical deal for the VA, and the plans were the best plans we'd ever built to. And we proposed to him that we start a company together, and he's like, let's do it. And so, in the early days, we were his pipeline. We brought deals into the company, but he came with his own business, and he goes out and finds his own book of business. He and he and his employees, and they do their own business development, but they still do a lot of our work too. So they're really standalone. They go work for other GCs. We work with other architects. There's kind of a Chinese wall there. But it is nice to have them on deals that it's a perfect fit for when our client wants a turnkey model. So those are, I've always been an agent or a broker, and it didn't make sense for us to pay a brokerage company to go out and find land for us or our clients. We do that ourselves. If we build a development that has, maybe some investment space on part of it, maybe for us or for our client, we normally don't go out and hire a brokerage company to do that. Our brokerage company does it. Kudu Realty Partners takes that listing. We sell real estate for our clients. Very often they'll buy more land than they need. We'll then entitle it, divide it up, master plan it. And sometimes we're selling the pieces off for them. And that's a way for them to recapture some of that capital they've put into the deal. So that was kind of the birth of the brokerage company, and the flooring company was just a right place, a right time. We just because we're in the business, we happened to meet a guy who wanted to start a company, and we started it with him. And after just a couple of years, we didn't see eye to eye, and again another amicable split. I think he's still in the business and doing his thing. And we brought a younger guy up in the business who is a guy named Mark Lang, who's absolutely killed it. He's so suited for it. He knows everybody in the business, and he's very, very aggressive in marketing and getting to know people and staying in front of people. Again, that's sales. He just gets it. He just gets it, and people like him and want to be around him. And he's grown that Paramount Floors to a very successful position in this Austin market. And so again, we feed him our business, feed him the deals that we're involved in, but he and his team go out and business development, find their own business.
Right. So it sounds like, and a big part of sales, is also not just selling for business, but also convincing potential employees, potential partners, selling them on the vision of where you want to take this thing, convincing them to come on board. Yeah. So it sounds like you're very big on that people aspect of the business. And for you to, correct me if I'm wrong, but for you to be able to run 5 different businesses, consecutively, you need the right partners in place. Now, do you have a partner for each kind of leg of this business?
For the most part, we do, yeah. So again, Warren and actually we have another partner in that firm, a designer named Carlos. He's great as well, extremely talented designer, and they run that company. They've got some great architects on board. They're the day-to-day there. We came up with the idea. We were the founding partners, if you will. And again, we gave them their daily bread to kind of start this thing. It's nice for a startup to never have to go. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through, although I wouldn't trade it. I say that I don't want anyone to go through it, and right. I guess I do. Because like you said, you cut your teeth and you learn so much. Mm-hmm. But it's nice when a company, that you've got so many challenges as it is when you start a company, to not have to worry, am I going to go out of business for 3 years, every other week? It's nice. And so we start these companies and because we're vertically integrated and we've got the deals to feed them, then they don't need as much anymore as they grow. We still bring a significant part of the revenue, but it might go from 80% of the revenue down to 20% of the revenue, 10% of the revenue. That's what we hope happens. And then we're simply involved as, from the financial aspect and kind of from the board of directors aspect and, thinking of new lines that we can explore as a company, new directions we can go. So it's Carlos and Warren at Bluefin, and it's Mark, and then Tom, who's Tom Burdell, who runs our Dallas office. We have a flooring company office there as well. They really run the day-to-day in that business. We couldn't do it. There's no way, right? I spend most of my time in the brokerage business and the development side, and that's enough. In fact, I've never really built a staff around me for those. I've got a couple of people, a guy named Joe Golden, who's a really talented guy that came out of the human, and we do a lot of animal health we call it cadre animal health real estate. It's another specialty of ours. We've probably done 15 or so veterinarian and animal related projects and probably have 20 kind of in the cooker right now. We've gotten good at it. We picked that as a model that we liked, and we went after it and got some vets to convince some vets to hire us. And we've built all kinds of veterinary facilities. Joe came out of that veterinary nutrition and equipment sales world, but he also had his real estate license, which was so random that I found him. And he busts his butt every day out there trying to find veterinarians we can build for, does business development for Cadre, does brokerage. And, we're always looking for that next talent. It's probably a shameless plug, but we really need somebody that can step in and take our brokerage company to the next level. We're looking for that person right now. Somebody who's got enough skins on the wall, they've done deals, but they're also a good coach. Somebody who really could hire and grow that business, bring on the next partner to help grow that side. So you're right. If you get past level 1, maybe level 2, you've got to have somebody running those companies. There's just not enough time in the day. Not work enough.
So how have you guys gone about finding these people? I mean, it sounds like there's some tremendous talent on the team. How have you found some of them I know you may attribute to luck or whatever, but how have you guys been actively seeking these candidates?
You may have found this too lately. I think it's harder right now. Mm-hmm. I think it's harder to find. Again, I'm not faulting people who maybe want to work less than they used to, but everything seemed to change with COVID. Maybe it was already changing. I don't know. Maybe COVID was kind of the excuse. So there are a lot less people who want to go down that road right now, I'm finding, and a lot less people who even want to work, more than a 40-hour work week, and they just want a little more balance in their life. And so I'm finding it a little more difficult. We are finding it more difficult. We found each one of our people differently. Warren, we found on a project that we built and he designed. He found Carlos just because he had worked with him. I found Joe Golden that kind of helps me with Kudu, and we got a couple of other agents through LinkedIn. He just happened to see an ad I put up on LinkedIn. Charbel and I found at a broker event when 12 years ago when I kind of mentioned at this broker event, we get the microphone and we talk about it's called a property information exchange.
Right.
Talk about the properties that we have and the needs that we have. I just kind of did a PS at the end and said, by the way, I'm looking to hire a construction expert for my company. There happened to be a builder there who walked over and gave me a couple of names and told me that they gave me 3 names, and he said, the last one, you probably won't get this guy, but he'd be the best one. Well, I didn't call the first 2 ever. Like, why would you even tell me those names, right? So I went after this guy, and that's how I found him. We put, we advertise on LinkedIn, we network in the community, but I think finding partners is at best a 50-50 proposition. We've had quite a few that didn't work. And that's okay. It's like marriages. Some just don't. You just don't see eye to eye, and you realize that. So finding that right partner, like I think we have found in our current companies, is just there's nothing like it. You don't always get along. You don't always see eye. None of us all see eye to eye, but we work through it, and we are all very ambitious and tenacious, and we've got a lot of faith that what we're doing is right. And when we screw up, we're gonna, it's not the end of us. We're gonna find ways to come together, and when we disagree, we don't have big arguments. We have little ones though.
Yeah.
Are you finding? I mean, hiring's tough right now, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, especially in my world, a lot of what we're looking for is commission only. I mean, similar to your brokerage. It's a challenge. It takes a very specific person to be attracted to this. The potential, I think sky's the limit, but they also, kind of have to be okay just eating it for a little bit, so to speak, and not putting in the work and knowing that it's going to pay off, but you're not going to see the weekly paycheck, the bi-weekly paycheck, whatever it is. You're not going to have that sense of security.
And a lot of people don't have that luxury.
No, absolutely not. I mean, when you have a family especially, but even if you have bills to pay or you have, something that's a responsibility, right. If you don't have something that's steady coming in, it's a challenge. And you have to have enough confidence in yourself to I think, make that jump.
Well, so let's go back over some of the things we already talked about. Each one of those phases required one of those leaps of faith. And so I counsel younger people frequently in saying, when you have that opportunity, if you feel entrepreneurial, don't get stuck in analysis. Just jump. Go do something if you've got the luxury of doing that. So, at a very young age, I had the luxury of going into an all-commission business, but my wife had a job. She was a teacher, so it's not like we were living large, but I could go a couple of months without a paycheck. And then when I started, my company, I had the luxury of having some money saved, making some money on the house I sold, and also having some friends and family who invested in our company. And we signed notes and we paid them back with interest. Mm-hmm. So we formalized those relationships, but we had that opportunity. And with each new deal that we've done, I mentioned learning to raise money, learning to find equity, learning to find partners. Development is not easy to get into, but nor was tenant rep.
Right.
If you want it, you can find a way. You hone your pitch. You really put together a model, something that you feel passionate about, something that you can just sell with that vigor, and then you find ways to raise money for it, and you get ready for a lot of no's and maybe one yes. And I think there's less. I don't know. There's less people. America will always. We live in a great country. There's always we're always entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. And I love how just about anybody can make up their mind to do that. Others are more challenged, and I felt very blessed to have some opportunities given to me at a young age. But it's still hard work, and it's still scary. And people who work harder than me fail.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to be prepared.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, what I always tell people, especially my friends, people my age, you have an opportunity come up, you just I advise to just go for it and figure it out as you go. Even if you don't know the answer starting up, you get a great opportunity, just say yes and then figure it out. Especially being young, I think that's the time to take risk. Right. That's a time when you don't have as much responsibilities, as much to lose, because at the end of the day, as bad as it sounds, we could always start over.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier this interview, you didn't start your first company till what, 42? Yeah, 42 years old. So, we have all the time in the world where if we're going to fail, do it now rather than later in life.
But if you're all in, right, and you've got that burning desire to do it, I would tell myself at times, we can all move back into an apartment, 30, 45 minutes outside of town. Of course, that used to be a long way. Now I think that's close. 2 hours out of town, right?
Right.
We can all go move back into an apartment and share some beds if we had to, if it fails. It's not the end of the world. But if you don't strike out and try to take that opportunity, I would rather live with the failure than the regret.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know that I've ever, and I've failed a lot, and I still get involved in deals where I say, man, how could I have not known that? How could I have not seen that coming? And if I got to find a way out of this, or this could be a big loss for us. And that's on me. I literally did not see that scenario coming. And yet here it is. We're looking at bigger and bigger deals now, and, million becomes 10 million becomes 100 million. And that comes with its share of sleepless nights. Mm-hmm. And you kind of train yourself to live with the risk and be smarter and smarter about the risk that you take, mitigate that risk, and then you just gotta push hard.
Yeah. And I think your mindset is definitely a big piece of what's gotten you here. I want to talk about what's the lowest point in your career you would say, and what did you get from that? Was it when you first got started, the 2008 time period, or was it maybe once you were already rolling and had something come up that you didn't see coming, or what was that? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, if I tell you mine, you have to tell me yours. I've got to kind of define lowest point because I'm an eternal optimist. And so I get stressed out over a deal or I get worried about a deal. But big picture, I pretty much always know I'm going to find a way to be happy. I'm going to find a way to start over if I have to start over. I'm always learning. I'm always failing and then failing forward. So low point, I would qualify mine not as low as this is bad. I would qualify low for me as being like not knowing the way out, not knowing the solution, and having anxiety over that. And so you're right. My biggest points of anxiety were really those transition moments. It seemed like it was every one of those transition moments when I went from a salaried position doing property management into a commission-only brokerage. That wasn't low, but it was a gut check.
Right.
And then going from that into a completely different industry because I'd been offered a job in construction and business development. That was I'm doing it, and then why am I doing this? But I did. And then transitioning out of that into really not knowing where I was going next. Making the move to Austin and everything just seeming impossible, absolutely impossible. That was definitely the hardest time. Being really in debt personally and as a company. Not being able to borrow money, no deals. There was no deal flow. And you listen to the news and the social media and you pretty much are convinced the sky is falling. You have to tune that out. My dad used to say he made as much money in the down times as the up times because when things went bad, he was always out there hustling business he was turning over every rock and people weren't looking. They were just whining about how bad things were. Mm-hmm. And so that was a really, really anxious time. You know this, you're not going to go into entrepreneurship and not have those moments of almost terror. I'd wake up, I still do this and I try to meditate and pray and calm my nerves. And so this doesn't happen, but I'll wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and I'll wake up with a deal on my mind. I don't want that. You got to find ways to relax and not to think about it so much. I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night. I've dreamed about spreadsheets before. And my wife, one time I got out of bed and I said, she goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, hold on, I got to get on the computer. She's like, "It's 3 a.m. And I sat down, I came back and I said, "You're not going to believe this. I was dreaming something about a spreadsheet and I didn't want to lose it. So I went to the computer and I sure enough, it was right. It was accurate. It was like one of those moments. And I thought that's good and that's bad.
Yeah.
You need to be able to relax and sleep well and not think about stuff like that all the time. So there's anxiety that comes with it, and you've got to practice good habits, stay healthy and work out and unplug. And since then, I've had some anxious times. I've had some deals that I weren't sure if they were going to crater. But you eat the elephant one bite at a time. When you don't know the answer, and that's what I've learned to do. I'm always a big picture thinker, and it's harder, I think, for people like us. Maybe you may live in the minutia every day. I think in the big picture, and when things get a little anxious for me, or a lot anxious for me, I've got to go, all right, stop focusing on that. What can you do not only today, but in the next hour?
Right.
What can you do in the next hour? There are some steps I can take in the next hour, close my door, do some deep work, and start to find solutions. Make phone calls, send emails, have a meeting. There are things you can do. Right. And that's been my model to try to dig my way out of some potential problems. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's hard to, cause those moments just come in, whenever, you talking about the spreadsheet at 3 a.m. You can't really control that. Sometimes something pops in your head and you just got to do it. And I relate to that big time. For me, I'm going to tell you my lowest point because you asked.
Please.
Before my financing business, I had some carpet cleaning franchises. Mm-hmm. So I started that while I was in college at 19. I bought my first one. We scaled that up to 5. we were growing really quick. Our strategy was we were buying, failing franchises. So, a lot of the times it would take a certain period of time, 5 months, 6 months, a year maybe on some of them, depending on where it was, to turn this around. So, obviously there'd be a burn rate going on some of these. And being younger than I am, I'm still young, but even younger, I was even more aggressive than I am now. Yeah, right. Super aggressive and growing really fast. And my whole thing was be the best, be the top franchisee, do this, grow really fast. We were buying 1, 2 territories, every 8-9 months as fast as I could, basically. And, you get in the cash flow crunch, and you learn lessons really, really quickly and really hard. So, I went through a little bit of that where the money was running out, and I had my overhead had just gone up, 3-4 times of what it was, because I was trying to expand and keep this going and keep the revenue going up, which the revenue was going up, the top line, but obviously the overhead was as well. So I think that was a low point, and there was some loans I had to get me out of that, and luckily I turned it around and got everything going, and everything fell into place. We did turn those locations around into record-breaking numbers, which was, insane, but it worked out in the end. But that was, being in that moment was very challenging.
How old were you at that point?
So I started at 19. I bought, while I was in college. So, on top of all the schoolwork and stuff. But my main concern was running the business. I didn't, the school kind of came second. Yeah. My parents would hate that, but that was the reality. I cared more about the business than I did about the school. And, so the school was slacking a little bit, but I did end up getting my degree. I started with 1 franchise, bought 2 more a year and a half later, and then bought pretty much 1 every single, 8-9 months from then. So until we eventually got up to 5, I sold them all now, focusing solely on the financing stuff in this podcast. But we were moving really fast. We got Rookie of the Year that first year. We're doing great. One of the fastest growing franchises they've ever had. Oh. So it was great in a small market like Lubbock, if you're familiar with West Texas, college town. Yeah. So it wasn't a lot of high hopes there, but we made it work. Yeah. And that business was crucial, although very different from what I'm doing now, was very important in learning the fundamentals of business and learning, cash flow, learning managing people, even though it's a very different labor pool that I'm working with now than it was then. Sure. It's still, the same basis was managing people and learning all that stuff, marketing, sales that went into the business is crucial in any business. So I attribute a lot of that to where I'm at now, and still going, obviously much lower scale than you're at.
I don't know. I feel like I should be interviewing you because just to hear about, having that kind of mindset and jumping out into that level of like purchasing businesses as young as you were, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's you've got a really cool story. And, again, I tell my sons the same thing. They all have college degrees, and they're all out there finding their way in their various businesses. But I say, learn to be more than just an employee. You may always be an employee, and that's fine, but learn to be more than that. Learn to bring something of value. Don't just punch the clock and do the routine that was set out in front of you. Bring value to your organization and the people around you in your industry, because that brings value to your life, right? If we just show up and put the square peg in the square hole as the assembly line moves down in front of us, I just think that there's so much more out there that we can engage our minds and our hearts in if you're willing to push your boundaries a little bit. Think of ways to improve your workplace. the job that you're in. Think in terms of design and improvement, and think entrepreneurially. You know, you can be an engineer or you can be an entrepreneur who's an engineer. And I admire that you started so young. And now you're doing a podcast and a YouTube channel, and you're teaching me stuff.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. It was a lot of debt and a lot of chances I had to take. So, but everything worked out. But let's talk a little bit about where you are at today with your companies. Okay. I know I see your guys' signs all over town, so I know you guys have a lot going on. Yeah. But if you want to share some of those projects you guys are doing, you know, maybe the pipeline, and where they're all headed. Where do you see your companies in 5 years, 10 years? Yeah. And what would you like to see out of that?
You should have told me that selling something's off limits, because now you've cracked the door.
No, go for it.
So, you know, we've got about a 22-acre mixed-use development in Leander, right on Highway 183A, and it's in phases. There's, I think we have 7 of our first 10 buildings going up right now, and they're largely sold out or leased. We've got pad sites in there, so we bought all 22 acres, and then we carved it up. And we developed it. We spent years entitling it. It's a long process. It's a frustrating process. The development process is, you know, if you think it was high barriers to entry, you know, 5 years ago, it's so much more now. Just the process of getting through the required governmental entities and regulations and approvals and permits, et cetera, is very challenging. Every city's getting harder. They're just getting harder. So we'll go in and we'll entitle a piece of land. We'll carve it up into pieces. We'll keep some of it for ourselves, and we'll develop on that piece. Then we'll help the other. So we'll sell some of it off, just sell it outright. We sold a piece of that to some retail developers, and they're doing some frontage retail. We're still kind of partnering with another buyer of some of that land, in that we're helping market that for build-to-suits to sell the land. So it's right there on 183A frontage, right where the construction, I think, should be wrapped up by mid next year. I think it was a 4-year project. So the visibility couldn't be better. It's just a great site. And we can do restaurants, we can do coffee, banks, entertainment venues, hotels, that sort of thing. But the core piece I'm working on right now is what I know best, and that's that medical professional office park. 10 buildings, and about 7 of those are now sold or leased. And the first one, you know, should come online about January of this coming year. We've got some real notable users going into that space that, you know, helped us kick this thing off. We got another project that's sold out up in Georgetown, and we haven't even poured those slabs, about 42,000 square feet, but the whole thing is completely sold out. We have some investors who are buying some of that, and so they're looking to lease that space. We have several other projects like that in the works. What we really want to do now is we've got a 25-acre mixed-use development in Bee Cave that's very similar to the one I told you about in Leander. That one's called Point 183, and we have a Bee Cave project that's similar. It's probably 2 years to 3 years down the road. It'll take us that long to really launch it, but that's the kind of project we love now, because again, I get to do a lot of different things. My business partner and I, and the people that are on our teams, we get a lot of diversity. So we might be doing an urgent care or a surgery center on one piece of it, and we might be doing a 20,000 square foot strip center on the frontage, and we might be doing an entertainment venue like High Five, if you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. You know, we might be doing something like that on a piece of it. So those are the kind of projects that we really like, because they have a lot of character. It's a good size for us. 20 to 30 acres, 40 acres is probably about where we see ourselves maxing out for a while. And we still do the 4, 5, 6 acre projects. That's part of it. We really want to grow our cadre animal health real estate. I love that business. I love the veterinarians. We've just really developed great relationships in that community. And I really want to see ourselves doing 10 to 20 of those a year all across the state. And for the right facility, we'd go out of state. We've got projects in Houston right now, San Antonio, Dallas. If we got a 25,000 square foot, and that we've seen some veterinary facilities that are that large. It's hard to believe.
Wow.
If we had something like that in Norman, Oklahoma, we'd go up there for that for sure. We've got a project that we're looking at on the East Coast right now, but it's 100 plus thousand square feet, and it's industrial, and we're really doing a lot more industrial stuff right now. We were just awarded a 400,000 square foot industrial deal in Georgetown, and wrap your head around that. That's almost 10 acres under roof, a 10-acre slab. And that's just, it's mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
So we want to do more industrial. We really want to raise private equity. Again, just like we've stayed vertically integrated, we want to raise private equity and build a portfolio or two of those things that we really know well. Veterinary facilities, leased veterinary facilities, leased human medical facilities. That's something that's kind of on our radar. We've talked to some people about that, and we really want to raise the equity to do it, and then build a portfolio, and then maybe turn around and sell it once we've got to a critical mass, 25, 50 properties. That's the right size for a small REIT. So that's on our radar. I don't plan on retiring. I plan on maybe working a little less over the years, but that's a great thing about real estate. You don't really have to retire. You can just do deals.
Right.
You can broker deals. I know so many guys in this industry and gals in this industry that I admire so much. And as I've seen them get older and older, I do work with a guy at a title company. He'll probably kill me for not knowing his age, but I think he's almost 90. And the people that work with him say he comes into the office every day and knocks on their door and says, all right, here's the leads I'm chasing. Let's talk about these.
Wow.
And he's fired up.
Wow.
That's great.
That's an inspiration.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to keep doing deals as long as I can. Just stay involved and stay active and keep my mind fresh, and, keep doing mental gymnastics.
Yeah. Amazing.
So
how big is your guys' pipeline currently, if you don't mind me asking?
I think our construction company probably, I can see us becoming, in the rest of my career, I could see us kind of living comfortably in that $250 million range. And we're not there yet.
Right.
That's not us yet. But I've got goals, and I write them down, and I can see us being there. Developments, it's kind of hard because you got to add up everything that goes into development, the total value of everything that's built there.
Right.
And we've got some that are, $75 to $100 million developments now. But we don't own all of that. It's just we were the impetus. We started, we started the development. Ultimately, that's what it becomes, though. But I don't want to overstate, our role in it. But, we kicked it off. We bought the land, we master planned it, and then we set it in motion. So, I could see us doing, developments again in the not too distant future that had, $500 million total values before they're done. But that's going to take a whole lot more scaling up and a lot smarter people than me to partner with, and a staff around us. And I've got to decide, is that really me, or is that the next generation? Is that after I'm looking back, and somebody's really running the shop and doing the day-to-day and growing it probably beyond what I'm even capable of. I also have never been fooled by I don't ever feel like an imposter, but there are times when I'm around people that understand finance so much better than me and understand business so much better than me, and I go, man, I wish I was as smart as that guy. I wish I had that lady's financial acumen.
Right.
And so it does make you feel motivated to learn, but a little inferior sometimes. I guess that's an okay place to be.
Yeah.
I like the place we are. I think our flooring company is getting into that place where it's really competing with the best of the best in Austin.
Wow.
But it's not because of me. It's because of that team.
Yeah.
They're just so diligent about chasing deals and being and delivering a great product. We're not a flooring we don't sell materials. We're just an installer,
Right.
commercial installer only, and they're really good at it. So I like to watch it all happen around me and watch the success of these great people that have taken this and run with it.
Okay. I have a few more, and then I'll let you go.
No, I love it. Please.
What are you guys looking for when you're looking at some land to develop, or maybe on the brokerage side, on behalf of your clients? When you're looking at a deal, what are you looking for? Is there a specific market, specific demographic? Obviously, your tenants, a lot of them are medical office.
Yeah.
Do you go into a deal already thinking about the tenants that are going to be there? Or kind of walk me through the steps when you're looking at a deal.
So we're a little bit more of a demand side model than a supply side model. And what I mean by that is because of our foundations, because we would always, we had to go out and find these originally doctors who wanted to own their own real estate, right? They wanted to own the suite or the building that their practice, that they practice in.
Right.
And so we learned to drive the deals with the demand a little more than the supply meaning the site. Now, yeah, we did go out and find great sites. That's how we marketed these. We would go find a great site that was for example, right next to a hospital. We did a project in Round Rock called Vista 620. It's on Round Rock Avenue, right by the Round Rock High School and Hospital. Mm-hmm. That's been sold out for many years. We targeted that because it was right next to the Round Rock Hospital. And we knew doctors wanted to be there. We didn't only get hospital doctors, but it's like fast food restaurants. One plants their flag on a corner and 3 or 4 more follow. And so we would go after a good site because it had great visibility or it was right by a hospital or both. And then we'd just go make cold calls. We'd get a design package together. We'd go out and we'd talk to every doctor we can. We go to medical trade shows, maybe 10 a year, and we go to, set up a booth in their exhibit hall. We talk to doctors there. We attend a lot of the local organizations like the Central Texas Veterinary or Austin Veterinary Group or whatever it might be. We attend those. And so we go after the demand first. And then we start to put a development together. And we'll get a call because we've got the development, because we've got some inertia, because we've got a sign, because we're advertising online, because we're going to these medical trade shows. There's a lot of buzz, right? It may show up in the Community Impact News or the Austin Business Journal. From that, we'll get a call and someone will be looking for a site for a dialysis center. And we don't have it there, but we got the call. Right. And so that's our next deal. So then we take that demand, we take that deal, be it a veterinary and a dialysis center, an ER, something not related a creative workspace, and we'll say, that's okay, we can do this for you, but somewhere else. And then we engage that vertical stack that we've created. So that starts with a brokerage deal. We go out and we help them find a site. We find that site. They need 1.5 acres, and we find a 4-acre site. Let me actually give you a real example. We did a 60,000 square foot 10 building development in Cedar Park. It's called Spanish Oaks. That started with 2 doctors who came to us and said, I need 7,000 feet. Let's go find. They called me about one of my developments. We couldn't put them there. And I said, let's go find you a site. So we found a 7-acre site that could hold 60,000 feet. Talk about the tail wagging the dog, right? We contracted with them to build them only 7,000 feet. That was one of 10 buildings. We then could not swing that on our own, so we found some partners. We brought these partners in, and we bought the entire piece of land. We developed the entire piece of land. In the meantime, we went out and found several other deals. So I think our first phase was 3 of the 10 buildings. We built those 3 buildings. All of those were condos. We sold all of those. But over the next 4 years, we sold the thing out. Some of it we leased. Most of it we sold. But that involved architecture. That involved development, master planning the development. That involved the construction company. some of the product that we lease, we needed to raise capital for another development, so we flipped those and sold those, the condos with tenants in them. So again, we're engaging that vertical integration that we created with our businesses, and that was the model. That's what we love about it. So we can sell all those services a la carte, or we can bundle them together and really take somebody through. And a lot more than that. We've done deals where we'll go out and find a piece of land that's double the size that our client needs, but they don't want out of it. They want to maybe maybe become a passive investor.
Right.
They want some rental income, and they'll say, "Would you guys do it with us?" And we've done 4 or 5 of those where we'll partner with them, and we'll stay in the deal. We'll go on and build out that second phase. Sometimes we just run out of patience, and we all agree to flip it and sell the dirt. We'll keep a piece and lease it and be landlords together. And so we've done that a lot in the past, and probably will do it more in the future. And those are just deals that are driven by demand. We'll take a site as a relationship or a deal dictates. We still look for good sites that we love, but all too often we're just out in the market, clanking around with deals, and we go find a site that works.
Wow.
Yeah. It sounds kind of unscientific, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now that I say it out loud.
Yeah. But obviously it's worked. It's been successful, Last question. What would you give, what advice would you give to yourself, either, yourself 20 years ago, or someone just looking to start out in the real estate business, whether it's development, brokerage,
Sure.
Any of that?
Well, in a lot of cases, I would tell them to do what you did, not what I did. Start younger, right? But again, I can't discount the necessity of my path. It was very important that I traveled the path I did.
Right.
So if you do start younger, be it brokerage, be it owning a business, whatever it is, starting young, especially before you have financial commitments and you can stay really, really lean. Maybe your spouse works. Maybe you're just living so lean and you've got a little bit of money saved up and you and your spouse start a business together. Whatever it is, start young when you can, because it becomes harder and harder as you get older. So that's number one. Number 2 is patience. We live in a quick fix society, and that's just, I think it's a disservice that so many of us we see that social media feeds us this false sense of reality over wealth and over success. And you go live it and you just realize it's just not true.
Right.
I joked earlier about lottery winners. There's books out there. There's been studies about lottery winners. Even they struggle because all of a sudden they're in a different socioeconomic bracket, and their same friends aren't their friends. Their friends can't do the things that they used to do with them, and they have demands on them for their money, and their life becomes complicated. So even that's not easy. So be patient. Get out there, work hard, be flexible, and find the path that's right for you. But you're gonna have to. It's gonna take time. Wine ages. It just before it becomes great. Yeah. So it takes time. And then I said it before. I think finding something that you can get jacked up about. You may not even think that you love a particular business, but if you really dive into it, your business might be, your dream might be, I want to be a test pilot, but most of us can't be a test pilot, right?
Right.
You might want to own a professional sports team. Most of us can't do that either.
Right.
So those 2 things may not be your path, but you might find, I've known people who are very successful in the porta potty business, and they made millions, and they were gung-ho about what they did because they developed a passion for it. And so you find something, you love being an entrepreneur, you love being in business, and then you learn to sell it. And when you learn to sell it, look, if you sell it to others, you're going to sell it to yourself. You're convincing yourself every day of how great your product or your model is. And when you do that, our brains just adjust. The action, you do the actions first, and the emotions and the feelings follow it, not the other way around. It's like I've got to find the passion first and then do the thing. Well, do the thing first. The passion, the drive, that all comes because as our brains, that kind of come along for the ride as it sees what we're doing. And it's almost like you're kind of fooling yourselves, right? You can develop a love for for anything that you get that you really pour yourself into.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
What advice would I have?
Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking on what you said, start young. I mean, no one knows really when they're starting out. No one knows what they're doing. So
Right.
start out, learn, take the punches, learn everything that comes your way. There's going to be a lot of challenges, a lot of ups and downs, but just flow with it, and get going. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I started in the carpet cleaning.
Yeah.
Before that, I did a handyman business. And it led me to what I'm actually passionate about, which is finance, what I'm doing now. But just starting was the biggest thing. And I think that was the biggest challenge. And a lot of people, especially they start off as employees and get stuck in that world, kind of have a very challenging time seeing the other side. Yeah. And once you get started, you can see that more doors start opening up, more opportunities. I mean, with my business, for example, I've met you through my business,
right?
And that would have never probably happened if it wasn't for my business. And so I've learned a lot from you, a lot from my other clients, and you just keep expanding, just keep building on top of what you already have, and just keep going. Don't give up. I mean, that's all I got for the most part.
Yeah, and what you're doing is a service. So, I have a YouTube channel as well for Cadre Animal Health Real Estate. And I think you approach it kind of like I do. I just enjoy doing this because I want to talk to people that are smarter than me and do different things for me and learn from them. But then I want to put that out in the world, and YouTube and other platforms like that give us the opportunity to share in a little less of a programmed environment of what you might get. I mean, TED Talks is one that I think I've learned a lot from, but certainly less programmed environment than a class in college.
Right.
Or, I got my CCIM, which is a real estate designation back in 1993. I still remember things I learned from there. So many things I learned, but it couldn't compare to the first 3 years in business, what I learned. And when you do something like you're doing on these channels, I know with mine, the hope is that someone will watch this and get inspired and set a course for their life and say, I think I can do that.
Absolutely.
And then, they hire people and they, I go out to a job site and I'll think, how many people have been impacted by this one job site? The number of architects, civil engineers, city employees, subcontractors, clients who are going to move into there, their clients who are going to come see them as patients or customers. That ripple effect is very, very fulfilling for me. And it came with driving down the street and picking a piece of land one day. That's rewarding. That is very rewarding. And even if you don't own the business, just looking at your job every day and saying, I go to work every day and I do a thing, but people benefit from that. That's the spirit I like to encourage.
Yeah. Well, Ron, thanks so much, man. It was a great interview. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for the bourbon. I thought it was a great one.
It? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell the people, you have your YouTube channel. What are you guys looking for on the development? Are you guys raising capital? Is there anything that you'd like to share before we end here?
Sure. Anybody looking for, so first and foremost, anybody looking for a new facility, be it something that they want to, my brokerage company can help you find a new space to lease, right? A building to purchase. That is, unless it's a empty multi-tenant office building, which, since COVID, we have a lot of those. Unless it's that, those are becoming hard to find, particularly in Texas and some of the bigger cities in Texas. So it's good for our development business. So, starting the process of a build to suit or a design build, a ground up facility all the way to move in can be a 2-year process easily. We love to partner with people on that, befriend them, get close to them, get to know their families and their desires and their dreams, because we got to like them and they got to like us. And 2 years later or more, they move in. That we're anybody who wants that kind of a new place for their business. It doesn't have to be medical. That's who calls us. Somebody especially who wants kind of that vertically integrated turnkey package. But if you need architecture, that's like I said, that's a la carte. Bluefin Design and our group over there, they're great at what they do. If you need commercial flooring, Paramount floors, we're always looking for people to build for. And a commercial facility, we don't do any residential. We don't do multifamily, but anything commercial we'll pretty much build, especially technical construction. So that's because of medical. Anything that's got a lot of technical aspects to it, give us a call or look up, cadre-usa.com is a good starting point. That's our construction company's website.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I'm going to have his links below if you guys want to check out Ron's stuff. He's doing a lot of great things. And besides that, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe.
Thanks.